Welcome to RuralStrong, where we talk real challenges and bold solutions in rural economic development. I'm your host, Joe Barker. Let's get into it. This is Joe Barker, and this is RuralStrong, the podcast brought to you by Southwest Tennessee Development District in lovely Jackson, Tennessee. And wow, do we have a treat today. We have Victoria Hirschberg with us today, and a lady that I have great respect for, that has done great things in the economic development arena. She currently is the Assistant Vice President and Chief Economic Development Director at the University of Tennessee. Victoria, welcome to RuralStrong.
Oh, Joe, thank you so much. It's an honor to be here with you today and everyone who's tuning in.
Well, now, explain something to me. What does the Assistant Vice President and Chief Economic Development Director for the University of Tennessee, what is their job?
Well, Joe, that's a great question. I love that we're going to start there. So I have the great privilege of serving as the Assistant Vice President and Chief Economic Development Director for the University of Tennessee system. I serve 5 different campuses, 2 statewide institutes, which is over 62,000 students. We have a presence in all 95 counties through our ag extension. We are all over the state. And what do I do every day? It looks different every day, which I think in economic development, anybody could appreciate. My simple North Star every day, Joe, that I look to is I collaborate to create opportunities that impact our communities, our companies, and our campuses.
What a great role to have. And with a system behind you, such as the University of Tennessee, that's got to be exciting.
It really is an honor. And I think about how a university system like UT can really impact economic development and the state of Tennessee and of course, globally. But we play such an important role in economic development. And I like to share with, when I'm talking with companies or I'm talking with economic developers, we really impact everything outside of a manufacturing plant and everything inside the manufacturing plant. So when a company is looking for a great community that we have so many of in Tennessee, they're looking for the school district. Well, UT is training most of the K through 12 teachers in the state of Tennessee. They look at great healthcare. We train 70% of the dentists in rural Tennessee. So when I think about the great impact we have, we also train a lot of the economic developers through our certified economic development program. And it's really about connecting those pieces, sharing that story, and finding great ways to have collective impact.
Now, Victoria, what really inspired your interest in economic development, and how did you get started in this field?
Oh, that's a great question, Joe. And I think everybody listening in who's maybe an economic developer probably has a different story about how they got in it. So I'll share my quick background is I started, a couple of years ago. I won't timestamp it per se, but as a business reporter. And that's where I really started to understand how economic development impacted our local cities, how it impacted, at the time I was living in South Texas, so how it impacted global supply chain, cross-border trade. And I think I had the lens that what an economic developer did and how the business interaction was with the community. It took a couple of different years, and I went back to graduate school to pursue a master's in community regional planning and development, which was another segue into economic development. And then I was afforded a great job at the local level back in Texas when I finished up my master's degree to lead the marketing efforts. And that included business retention and expansion, that included marketing campaigns, all the trade shows. And it was just such a eye-opening opportunity. So, I kind of fell into it a little bit. It was looking for jobs all over that were impacting communities, impacting businesses. That was really where my passion was, to really help people and help areas. And that's what led me into economic development. And then I found my way to Nashville, Tennessee a couple of years later, and it's been amazing ever since.
The rest is history, as they
Yeah,
say.
something like that.
Okay, let's talk about the process a little bit. I'm from a rural community, and many times I thought, that we should get more folks looking at property we have, or just looking at our community, and isn't it true that most of the time a lead probably starts at the state level and then filters down through that process? Talk a little bit about the process of maybe how you work with a site selector.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I think everyone has a role in how they engage with site selectors. Even in my current role at University of Tennessee, we engage with site selectors because I think it's important for them to know about our campus assets, our hard infrastructure that can serve a company, like our UT Research Park at Cherokee Farm in Knoxville, or Smart City Corridor at UT Chattanooga. So I think engaging with a site consultant, if you work for a university, a rural community, the state of Tennessee, where I previously served before joining UT, is really important because you never know what will resonate, what type of clients they're seeing. And there are site consultants, Joe, and everyone who engages in the space that represent really large companies, big 400, I don't even know, 500-acre, 2,000 job, big infrastructure projects. And those are typically going to come through the state of Tennessee because they have big needs. But there are also site consultants that work with some of the small to medium-sized companies on maybe some mergers and acquisitions, or maybe they're looking at a secondary office, or maybe just getting their foot in the door in the US market. So I think it's really important for economic developers, again, if you're at a university, if you're at a nonprofit, to really engage with the site selector community.
Well, and particularly in rural areas, Victoria, I've always thought the number one thing that they need to understand is they need to have something to sell. It's sort of like a grocery store trying to sell product with empty shelves. And talk a little bit about that, how that, a community needs to invest in itself and actually have a site that they can sell to a prospective employer.
Yeah, I think about it in this way, and I've been reflecting on this, in my role at the university, and just even in my personal life, in my own life, right? I'll share. I like to pretend I'm a runner. I run for about 4 months out of the year, and I always run the Nashville Half Marathon at the end of April, the rock and roll race. And for the first time in 10 years since I've been running that race, I just got my fastest time, Joe. Um,
Congratulations.
why, thank you. But let me tell you, that takes work, that takes investment, that takes making adult decisions every day about exercise and diet. And I apply it to the same in economic development, and particularly in rural communities. It is all about building your competitive muscle. I use this kind of analogy at the UT system, but nothing is going to happen overnight without starting today. And so if you're looking at building a site, if you're looking at maybe attracting more medical professionals, if you're looking at bringing maybe some smaller business, some startups, like what does that look like? How do you start building that competitive muscle to help you do that? Because you're right, you need something to offer a company. May that be a startup, which also creates jobs, or may it be that very large state lead that's coming down too. So it's understanding how you have to continue to evolve and build that competitive muscle. So like when I think about running, it's every decision you make, every investment you make in yourself to get faster.
Well, and
Same thing in economic development.
sure, and Victoria, years ago when I got started in this business, most of the time, you might have a phone call and then people would make visits. But with today's technology, these site selectors can go online and they can find out just about anything they want to know about your community. So, talk a little bit about how important it is to have your marketing materials up to date, your website up to date for these folks that might pop in unknowingly to you.
Well, and you know what? They're doing it all the time, and they should. And I think this is something in the world of social media, and we'll talk a little bit of going back in time. When I started in economic development, I started my organization's first Twitter, now X account, because everybody else was doing it and it felt like we should do it too. And Joe, it wasn't that long ago,
Sure.
that
Well, it wasn't.
how quickly this evolved. And now we're talking about how AI is going to impact this. You could go into Chat GPT right now and probably write what are the best states that have no income tax, that have X amount of university, and it will spit out an answer. And of course it will say Tennessee, because go team Tennessee. But but there's so many different tools out there that if you don't have your story aligned in an authentic way that reaches a lot of different audiences, you're going to miss out. We talk about this all the time in economic development for the university. Like, what are those compelling messages to a site selector, to a company? What will resonate? What doesn't resonate anymore? And the reality, but I think what's so important in economic development, and so important to me, is being authentic, because you're right. Anyone could look at your crime stats and your school stats and go online and probably find something that fits a narrative either way. So it's important to really have your facts, and also kind of the narrative about change and progress, because no community is perfect. No one is. But sometimes it's really how you put those pieces together in an authentic way to share, to show companies and the external audiences and stakeholders that you're aware of the issue or the concern being addressed in a thoughtful way, and there are actions underway to make improvement or to change it in some way. And some things are just subjective anyways.
Sure. In rural communities, Victoria, and of course, grew up in one of those rural communities that was 45 miles from the nearest interstate highway. For many, many years, we had really didn't have many 4-lane highways in the entire county. And I know you worked probably the majority of your life working with industrial contacts and recruiting companies. But talk a little bit about your thoughts in a rural area, how they have to take a holistic approach and certainly look at manufacturing jobs, but look at their assets and look at tourism and retail and all these other things that go into that economic development puzzle.
Yeah, Joe, quick story. I grew up in the Bronx. I grew up in New York City, so not a rural community, but I went to
Now, let me
college.
ask you, hold it right there. Were you a Yankees fan?
Oh no. So yes, because I grew up in the Bronx, and I went to so many Yankees games before they
Okay, well, I
sold
guess
out to the
we'll
new.
end this podcast a
Well,
little early today.
no, but here's the caveat. I'm gonna age myself. My first game I ever went to was the '86 Mets in Shea, and so there's always been near and dear to
There
the
you
Mets.
go. There you go.
I hope I redeemed myself.
You did.
But I went to college in upstate New York, in a very rural county, one of the rural counties, and I worked at a law firm that really focused on rural issues. I interned there through AmeriCorps, and the same issues that were plaguing rural New York, are everywhere and across Tennessee. Transportation. How do we get people to jobs that are available? And I think as I kind of reflect, because I love traveling and we have such beautiful rural communities in the state of Tennessee, it does require a little bit creative thinking. And I know people have different thoughts on this, but I am an Airbnb user. And so I search filters, I search access to hiking, and I search access to roads not on the interstate to find great places to stay, or exciting places. And so many of those places are in rural Tennessee or rural America. And I encourage economic developers to really look at what's being said on platforms like that are not necessarily, they're tourism, sure, but those people that are coming through your community, you may not know, or they may have some interest in learning more. And those are great avenues to make some connections with those owners, if they're in town or even if they're out of town. So it's about finding some of those unique entry, on and off ramps. Universities could be great for that too. And I think about the deep connections University of Tennessee system through our ag extension, which is in all 95 counties in Tennessee, how we could all be partners in that conversation as well. So maybe just because they're thinking of an ag extension agent, they are deeply involved with economic development too, and have deep connections to our campuses.
And
So I do think it's a big place to connect.
well, it absolutely is, and in your experience, Victoria, and this is one of the things that I guess troubles me the most sometimes, particularly working with rural communities, is the importance of local leadership working together. And primarily in Tennessee, we're talking about county government leaders, city government leaders, working in a collaborative way. Do you see the importance in that as much as I do?
Well, leadership at any level is important. Maybe anywhere in your community, in your household, in your small agency, leadership is important. And I think having a vision that everyone is bought into is really important, because leadership, sometimes changes at a city level or federal level or state level, and that happens, and that's going to happen. Um, but if there's a solid vision for economic development and a strategic plan that people can get behind, and really has some teeth and strength, I think that's the focus of the economic developer.
Let's turn the page a little bit and let's talk about some challenges. Victoria, what are some key challenges you see facing economic development? And it doesn't necessarily have to be just Tennessee, but just in general, what are some of the real challenges we have out there today?
Challenges are everywhere, but I think I've been reflecting on just how much, thinking about the macro trends in our economy, thinking about the environment we're living in right now, and how different, even if you looked back 10 years, and how looking ahead 10 years is going to be different. You cannot discount the impact that AI is going to have on industry, on the jobs that we're leading, on how we train people, how we educate people, what skills are needed. I think that's the hot topic on any news outlet you listen to today, about how AI will continue to impact. So from an economic development standpoint, do we want those? How does manufacturing look in 10 years? Could be very different. Job numbers could be less, but they could be really high paying jobs. They could require different education. And I don't know. I'm just listening like everyone else. But I think how technology could impact that, how targeted sectors may change. We've seen that in the past with textiles, and they went abroad. But as things continue to shift in a macro economy, I think we'll see where this lands. Working at a university, higher ed, and how we continue to evolve, how we deliver degrees, but also how we look at reskilling folks that maybe want to come back to achieve a bachelor's degree or maybe a micro credential. And then you look at things like quantum and nuclear that aren't necessarily new, but they're in that point, Joe, where there's commercialization opportunities and companies are interested. So what does that mean to an economic developer that is working with a quantum company? And if anyone has the answer, they can call me immediately. But that's stuff, like, those are things that we're exploring now that, wasn't a thing 10 years ago. So it's really exciting, maybe a little scary, but I actually think that's where, as an economic development professional, that constant education, that constant inquiry as a professional, checking in with your community, checking in with your companies, right? Always going back to business retention and expansion, that importance of a BRE program. And I consider UT a big part of that BRE angle, is so important.
Well, and I know, I guess the next question, certainly UT is certainly involved in, and when you look at rural areas, the the workforce. When you talk to site selectors or companies, and they may have this checklist of things as they are looking. Certainly, workforce is on that checklist. And what's your thoughts on workforce, and maybe particularly in rural areas, about addressing that workforce, and how do you get that workforce where it's more attractive?
Joe, workforce is such a big issue. I was just in a rural community in Tennessee yesterday with a little bit of an industry roundtable, and we were joined by some of our education partners from our community college as well as our College of Applied Technology in the region. And workforce was, of course, the number one issue. How do we find people? How do we retain people? How do we get them prepared for the next set of skills or this new production line we're bringing in? So, and those conversations are happening across the country, across the world. Tennessee is not unique in that, but I do think continuing to find ways, and then I always go back to UT has 62,000 students. How do we keep that talent in Tennessee? Many from rural areas across the state, and finding those different pathways to bring talent home. That's a big thing we talk about with our alumni network, which is massive across the world and across the state. How do we talk to jobs about engaging with our graduates as part of their pipeline or part of the story of why they would want to come to Tennessee? But workforce is so important. One thing that I'm really excited about that we're doing at UT System is a work to learn pathway, which allows workers that are currently in any industry, but we're starting in manufacturing, which is so exciting, to work in place and also achieve their degree at the same time. And that could be through a community college first and then transfer to UT, or just go straight to UT to achieve that bachelor's degree. But the important thing is they can stay in place. So if you are currently working, you can stay in your company in, Dixon, Tennessee, be working online and with a mentor. And I think that's such a retention opportunity, but also a way to engage more workers to see a path forward of growth and development over time. And we're really excited about it. We're in a pilot phase. So, right, we're hoping that for some good outcomes, but thinking creatively, thinking differently about how we engage workforce, how do we grow and how do we retain and develop our existing workforce is just essential. And so the state of Tennessee is doing some really great collaborative work around that, and UT is just really excited to be part of it.
And another piece of that, and I know that it does not come directly under the UT system, but you and I both live in Tennessee, and we've seen great success in this state in recruitment and expansion over the last number of years. I know we've got a lot of listeners that are not from the state of Tennessee, and Tennessee has a robust technical college system. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think, well, as a proud Tennessee transplant of the past 14 years, that's what I call myself, Joe. I think when it comes to economic development and education, it's all about finding your path and finding your direction. We work closely with our community colleges and our colleges of applied technology. And I actually think having 3 different layers or 3 different entry points for Tennesseans to go to a TCAT, to go to a community college, to go to a 4-year, to go to UT, public or private, is such an advantage for our state in economic development. And that's why when I mentioned the Work to Learn Pathway program, we're working with our 2-year partners because it creates pathways for everyone to achieve a certificate, an associate's degree, a 4-year degree, a PhD, or whatever somebody wants to achieve in the state of Tennessee, and also provides on-ramps and off-ramps at any given point in someone's career, in their life. Life happens. You don't always go to college at 18. Maybe you go back at 30 or older. And I think that is a real superpower for the state of Tennessee to have those different entry points. And if you're a company, and I always used to say this when I was in recruiting companies, you need management, you need your leadership, or you need these certain skills. Well, let's start with the university because that's where it goes. But if you need a really high-end welder that maybe only needs, a certificate, well, let's go to the TCAT. Let's see what high-level MIG-TIG welding they have. And that's why we all work together. And I also think that's a superpower of the state of Tennessee is you find such a collaborative spirit. And I always say that we extend our table at UT. We extend our table in economic development in the state of Tennessee because truly there is a collaborative spirit here that companies and stakeholders feel and experience when they come to the state.
In the few minutes we've got left, Victoria, I wanted to touch on something that you have experience with, and I know a lot of communities are interested in foreign direct investment and becoming involved in recruiting some of these firms from other countries. Talk about that process a little bit, and if you were talking to a local economic developer and that's one of their strategies, what would you tell them?
Well, I think recruiting foreign direct investment in Tennessee is so fortunate. We have so many great companies from all over the world represented here. And in my career at the state, I had the great privilege of visiting with many of them in home country. Um, I think it goes back to kind of what types of industries the community is interested in, that has the product for, that really will drive the interest in foreign direct investment. Um, what kind of product, what kind of workforce do you have? And if that is, if automotive being so important to the state of Tennessee and really the Southeast, if your supply chain, if you have a Japanese OEM nearby, like that could lend itself to those tier one, tier two automotive suppliers that may be from Japan or Asia. So that may be something of interest. And then it's also kind of really understanding, the market, understanding some of maybe the country, the currency, like what's happening in those greater macro issues to help set the direction. Also, I would encourage you to go to the Tennessee Language Center under UT Center, Institute for Public Service, maybe pick up some language skills. It always paid forward. When I took some Japanese lessons when I was spending a lot of time in Japan when I worked for the state. So I think but it goes back to kind of the basics of like, what is the vision? What are our key industries that we can recruit successfully? And how do we, again, like be authentic and be compelling? I think one thing that really tracked when I was working with the state, we were working with a Korean company, and the international students at UT Martin, it was UT, it was in Northwest Tennessee, so it was Martin, really made a difference in that community. So don't forget about your universities and some of those international connections, that UT has and other partner institutions. There could be a really good partnership to be had there.
Okay, last question for our economic developers out there that are listening that are new to the.
I hope it's a good one.
It is a good one because I know you've got the answer and can encourage them. For those economic developers that are new, and we know this is a business, Victoria, that you don't get a win every day, and lots of times you have to have a lot of no's before you get a yes. From a person that's experienced like yourself, what advice could you give to that economic developer about the profession itself and maybe to just persevere?
Well, that is a good question, and I'm going to go to my new favorite expression that I go to, and it's sometimes you win and sometimes you learn. Not everybody in this business is going to have great breaking news Twitter updates about a new announcement. In fact, most of us don't. But economic development and laying the groundwork, right? It goes back to building the competitive muscle. It takes time. It takes vision. It takes putting some pieces together. Sometimes it takes throwing things against the wall, seeing what sticks, and failure is just part of it. So sometimes you win, sometimes you learn, and being able to move on from those failures, reflect. And I think about that throughout my economic development career. If I didn't fail all those times, it would never have brought me here, or would never have brought that company here, because I learned from that, or we learned from that as a team. And I really do think it's not easy all the time. And of course, sometimes there's pressure, but I think it's important to keep pushing forward. North Star always, what is the bigger vision, and keep marching toward that. And there's a time where you just start to grow and experience different things, and again, it's all about learning and staying strong.
Well, excellent advice, and if there's some folks out there listening that would maybe like to get in contact with you and maybe have a question about the University of Tennessee or whatever it might be, is there a website or somewhere that they could find a place where they could contact you?
Yeah, absolutely. One, I'm not answering any predictions on football season this year, so don't ask me those questions. But I'm
Undefeated.
always, there you go, undefeated. Um, I am always happy to pay forward. A lot of economic developers helped me along the way, so I'm always happy to pay that forward. I'm a LinkedIn user. You can find me there. Victoria@tennessee.edu is my email. I'm fairly easy to get a hold of, so always up for a coffee or a virtual connect.
Well, Victoria Hirschberg has been our guest today, and I've thoroughly enjoyed this. And Victoria, I want to tell you personally, I appreciate all that you do and all that you mean to the state of Tennessee and the University of Tennessee system. And we look forward to having you back again in the future.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it, Joe. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for joining us on Rural Strong. If you found this helpful, share it and follow the show for more insights from rural leaders making a real difference. Until next time, stay rural strong.